Executive Director of World Arts West. I'm super excited about launching our Living Traditions video series. We want to thank many of you for supporting World Arts West over the years. If you like what you see today, please go to worldartswest.org to support our programs. Enjoy the episode today.
Hello, my name is Mahialani Uchiyama, and I'm co-artistic director of the San Francisco Ethnic Dance Festival. We'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging that the Bay Area is contemporarily known as Ohlone territory. There are many language dialects and many active tribal groups. We acknowledge the San Francisco Bay as the territory of the Yelamu Ramaytush Ohlone.
Greetings. My name is Latanya D. Tigner, co-artistic director of the San Francisco Ethnic Dance Festival. Welcome to our third episode of Living Traditions, exploring dance beyond the performance. With this program, World Arts West aspires to lead our audience on a journey that explores various dance disciplines through a series of online interviews. Our conversations with artists will focus on their art form, its history, and what makes it unique. Each episode will focus on one company practicing a specific tradition. We will discuss how they find a balance between holding tradition and embracing innovation. Additionally, we want to give you the opportunity to ask questions of the audience, of the artists, as well as learn a basic dance movement from the tradition they practice. So get ready to move your body.
Today, we will be interviewing the co-directors of Academy of Danse Libre, one of the nation's premier vintage dance companies. They specialize in carefully constructed choreography from original source materials and historically accurate costuming. I am delighted today to welcome Artistic Director Kimber Rudo.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. We'd also like to welcome Assistant Artistic Director, David Starkey.
Hi.
Hey there, great to see you. And last but not least, Managing Director, Pei-Ling Lee.
Hi.
Hey
Hi.
there. So before we enter our conversation, we'd like to encourage you, our audience, to consider a donation to World Arts West, the producers of the San Francisco Ethnic Dance Festival. And you will be seeing periodically information in front of you as to how you can do that. Any donation would be greatly appreciated and very much needed. Thank you so much. And before we get started, I'd love to have each of you tell us a little bit about what you do and maybe a little bit about what you're wearing.
Okay, well, I am Kim Baruto. I'm the Danse Libre. I curate our choreographies. So our company looks at period choreographies from around the early 19th century, like 1812 or so, all the way through the late 1930s. So every year we don't focus on all of that. So I will pick a selection of time periods to focus on. And I also do the majority of our teaching, and I stage our performances, and I coordinate with our guest choreographers. We bring in people who are experts at different periods.
Awesome. And David?
Yes, I am David Stark. I'm a co-director of this group, and I do a number of other leadership tasks within the group. I do a lot of facilitation of our group decision-making because we have a very flat, consensus-driven decision-making style in the group. I also deal with a lot of technical issues like rehearsal sound, and I help run rehearsals and other assorted issues like that in terms of the leadership issues within the group.
That's awesome. And Pei-Ling?
Hi, I'm Pei-Ling Lee, and I'm a managing director for Academy of Danse Libre. And so what I do is mostly a lot of the logistics and like the day-to-day tasks of making sure we renting the rehearsal space, coordinating with our treasurer, and just like and also like logistics running wherever we perform. So interfacing with the performance spaces we go to. So that's what I do.
Pei-Ling herds cats.
And I understand there's also, you have a number of other people that are really instrumental to the running of your organization. Would you like to speak anyone to that?
I can speak to that a little bit, and we can rotate around. Our group relies heavily upon volunteer input from everybody in the organization. So even though Pei-Ling, David, and I do a lot of the organizational work for this group, a lot of people are involved. Charday, for example, who you will meet in a little bit, runs part of our warm-ups. She does classical work with us. We have another lady named Felicia who does more modern movement. Everybody kind of volunteers in the way that they feel they can best contribute.
Cool. So, you know, I'd love to find out a little bit more from each of you, perhaps, about what it's like to move from generation to generation, evolve with evolving traditions that you're having to research and recreate, sometimes through manuscripts. And what can you tell us about the challenges or advantages of experiencing dance performance and dance creation in that way?
I'll start and then we'll kick it over. Because we look at such a wide range of dances and a wide range of time periods, the way that we can learn about those time periods varies based on the era in which it was originally created. So, of course, early some of our, this is, for instance, what you're seeing here is a Regency dance. The Regency was the early 19th century. It refers to the English Regency, the regent of England is one of the regions discussed, referenced rather, but those dances were written down. As you get later, of course, when you get into the 20th century, sometimes we are lucky enough to have video evidence of what dances might have looked like, and a lot of other kind of written materials.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Feeling, did you have something?
yeah. So like, what's interesting is, as you said, as Kimber described, we span a long time period of dance, and so there's a lot of dance styles that are committed to writing, but there's a lot of it comes from traditional folk dance. So like in the Regency period, there's a very famous dance that's known as Sir Roger de Coverley. It's seen in Austen films sometimes. It's referenced in Dickens books, like people performed Sir Roger de Coverley. But like nowadays, people also know of it as the Virginia Reel, and school children learn it in classrooms. And it's the same dance. Like you can see it's been passed down. It started as like an entry English or Scottish country dance. It ended up in like these high society ballrooms where everyone knew the dance. It was an easy dance for everyone to do, and like now it's been passed on so that children still learn it in school in some areas. I think there's been documentation of people learning it in Finland, and like I know members of our group, when we taught Sir Roger de Coverley, were like, oh, I learned this as a kid in elementary school. Like, like I remember doing this with my classroom. And so it's interesting because like there is this tradition of dance. It's people do dance because they love to dance and it's fun to learn. And a lot of it comes from folk dance. So, and what we do is really the ballroom, like this high society version of it, but like it transcends over lots of time periods. And I think David can speak to some of like the reconstruction aspects of what we do from manuals itself.
Yeah, so a lot of the earlier stuff that we do does come from things that were written down. So we have sources, and those range from things like handwritten. There's handwritten manuals. Oh, here we have a plate of a Regency era waltz that is an engraving showing people doing that. This is a handwritten dance manual that somebody wrote down a dance that they were working on, and that's something that we were working on reconstructing in the group this year. And later on, we also have other. As you get later on in the 1800s, you get more dance masters with more personal ego invested in the process, I guess, and you end up with a more prescriptive approach. This is what you should do and versus what you shouldn't do. And then in the 20th century, I think what we just saw, we had a 20th century dance manual with the feet, the Arthur Murray feet that everybody would have seen. This is like a correspondence course for learning how to do a waltz. But there's also limitations to what's written down. In some cases, people are describing stuff like the earlier pieces that we were looking at, where it's descriptive of something that they were trying to do. And in some cases, it's prescriptive. And in some cases, they're telling you this is what to do. And it's a way to see what actually everybody was doing when it was the exact opposite of that. So people would say, do not do this. Everybody is on the dance floor doing this thing, and it's terrible. And in this particular dance manual that you're looking at right now, Grammar of the Art of Dancing, this is a page from the French quadrille. And on the left side, there is a paragraph where he's describing, here is what most people do on the dance floor. Don't do that. So when you have manuals like that, you can make a choice about whether you're going to do how it's prescribed, or you could try to recover what everybody was actually doing when they were doing this for fun, which is by looking at what they're telling you not to do.
That's very interesting. I want to step back to the folk aspects of the folk origins of the elevated forms. What in your research, how did those forms get chosen to be elevated into those spaces? Was it just happenstance, or was it a concert, like that dance is going? I'm pretty sure there was an evolution, but she can talk to that a little bit.
Every step style, like it kind of has its own like story. The dance that we performed that was shown is a polka, and polka is a folk dance that originated in Bohemia, now known as the Czech Republic, and so it was done there. And what has like the origin story of that is some music teacher noticed this a woman doing this type of dance to a folk song and thought it was interesting. So he brought it to the ballrooms of Prague, of the royal courts at the time, and it was taught there. And from there, it moved to Vienna, which was another like center of society and like at the time period, and that became very popular there. And then from that, a very famous dance master from Prague did a showcase, an exhibition of the dance style in Paris. And from there, Paris being this like at the time period, I believe it was 1840, being like the center of like fashionable society in all of Europe, like it just exploded. And like there are things written about polka mania. Every ballroom that was of any like a renown people would be doing the polka. And if you watch us do it, it's a really fun dance. People are just like galloping about with their partner for the most part. And it makes sense why this like fairly simple dance structure just became so popular at the time. And so that's kind of like one of the examples. It's often like dances that get selected. So I think there's a question, like, where do we find these written materials? A lot of dance masters committed it to writing, specifically about polka. I think there's a Czech historian that actually wrote down the background of how he believed it came about, and he wrote it he was a historian, so he was actually just trying to document the process of how it got transmitted. And so he has, and they're theories in some cases, right? Because you don't actually know, you're trying to trace it back, but you can find these in publications, in books and libraries. And once it becomes famous and popular, all these dance masters have their way of trying to like teach others of how to dance. So that's kind of like one example of how it is. And it's one that's seen often. It gets to like Paris and it becomes really popular. Like fashion at the time was centered around the Parisians got it first, and then everyone else followed. And so if you look at clothing, it's definitely appears first in Paris and then like in London, and it moves on from those centers of culture.
I think another example of that's a more modern example is dances of the ragtime era, which I think you could argue is a uniquely American folk tradition. It's based on a very American form of music, which is ragtime music, which arose from African American rhythms. And the vernacular dances of the early ragtime were things that were very easy to do, but a little scandalous, not to the modern eye, but like to people who were coming out of the 1890s and doing things that were very proper. So they would do dances that were animal dances that were made to, you move like a bear, you move like a turkey, move like a rabbit. We have a whole piece that we do all the little animal dances. And they're a lot of fun to do, but they were a little bit too out there maybe for much of the public. But once they were taken on there was a married pair of dancers named Vernon and Irene Castle. They took some of these forms and they took this music and they kind of made it elegant by making it a one step. So it became a classy walking dance. And then they performed it in Paris. And once you do that, apparently it becomes all the rage.
So are there any instances of full-on improvisation within the genres that you work with? Or,
I mean, a lot of these dances that we do are things that people did for fun. I mean, Kimber touched a little bit on how, like, I think every generation thinks the things that they're doing are a little bit scandalous compared with what came before. Even the waltz, when it came out, was scandalous, people touching each other. But then as it moves on, it becomes more something your parents did or your grandparents, and it's maybe not as scandalous as it was before. But every generation is finding its thing that's exciting to them. But a lot of these forms do have improvisation in them, and sometimes we even will perform with improv. I think the first time that we performed at the Ethnic Dance Festival, we did we were out in the lobby, and our opening piece was an improv one step, that we threw together at tech rehearsal because we needed a little bit more time. So we just put on some music, and that's how we put that together. And we do enough work with that form that a lot of us are just very comfortable just throwing something like that together. So yeah, a lot of these forms can be improvised. Some of our choreographies have improv portions in the middle of them. Some of the earlier dances have very specific figures that you're performing, so there's less room for improv there in the form, but then there's also room for like the kind of acting and emoting that you can do when you're doing a figure.
Once you get to something, when we started out initially with quadrilles or set dances where there's a figure and everybody has to know the figure so you can interact with each other, and it was a very kind of social structure. It was designed so young people maybe looking for someone to marry had a socially acceptable way to meet other people who were looking for someone to marry. I think people also did it for fun, but a lot of the early quadrilles, you would have a figure and you would move through a lot of partners over the course of maybe even an hour for a single dance. So you get to see a lot of people. But when you get more into the middle of the century, looking at the polka, for example, we still dance polkas today. And we certainly, all of us are social dancers also. So we go out and do this for fun with other people who do geeky things like polka and one step and waltz. And that's totally lead and followable. You do not need a choreography. It's a purely social form.
I have a question regarding artistic. You already talked about a little bit about the artistic license that's taken to kind of recreate some of these pieces. But in the vintage dance community, is there a time when if you all recreate a piece, do you share it with? Is there an exchange with other organizations? With the work that you reconstructed, is it that kind of sharing of work that happens in your community?
So we work with a lot of experts who come in to teach us things, so when we're working with somebody who's come in and brought a piece and choreographed a piece for us, we treat that piece with respect, and we don't share their work without their permission. But there's a lot of this that's in living tradition, and that stuff we do share, and there's a lot of sharing of that. So it kind of depends on the specific piece, but we work with a lot of experts who bring us all kinds of pieces. I don't know if you want to go through some of the people we work with. It's such a long list, but some of the really significant to our group is Richard Powers, the dance historian at Stanford. A lot of us were, this group had its genesis in a group that he ran at Stanford when some of us were students. And there's other people. Joan Walton has choreographed a number of pieces for us. I think we've gotten some history stuff from Walter Nelson. Who else am I leaving out here?
Rob and Diane Von Heron,
yeah.
are swing experts from Texas. This is just this year. We've worked with Monica and Ryan Schnotz, who have worked with us with some late 19th century pieces. Because what we do is so broad, there are people who are specialists in each of those areas, and it's always really useful to have those people come in and help us understand what we're seeing, and also they bring us new choreographies and new ideas that we never would have known about. We're very fortunate because where we live, we're close to Richard at Stanford, who is really a pioneer in the field of vintage dance and kind of an internationally renowned choreographer and researcher and historian. So our proximity to him really gets us a lot of great knowledge. You can go see his website where he has posted some of the documents that we sometimes use. And in fact, some of the documents that have appeared on the screen came from his library. And we're also very close to Joan Walton, who is at San Jose State. She helps us a lot with our, when we have a really big show, we need to have like historically accurate staging, which it's sometimes one of the things that's hard for us is we have to, without the elaborate sets of a film studio, for example, we have to communicate where we are in space, and that is its own challenge. And so Joan, for example, is really good at helping us communicate to an audience where we are without, a piano in the background or something to help us get that across.
So I want to remind our audience to feel free to submit questions. And we do have a question from Danielle, who would like you to speak about how do you find your written materials?
I guess you want me to speak to that? I'll start, and then so there are a number of famous books that were published at different times that I think everybody who works in this area is familiar with. So, for example, Wilson's Waltzes, which you saw one of the plates from Wilson's Waltzes, which had all the little people doing the waltz in Regency era. That's one of the earliest manuals describing what a waltz looks like. I think most people have seen that. Vernon and Irene Castle, it's another good example. They wrote a book that is a thing that's very easy to find on the internet. There's a few documents like that, but there's a lot of other places. People would write letters to each other. So sometimes you would see a description of a piece that someone saw and they wrote in a letter to someone else. One of my favorite places is newspapers. At the turn of the century, like into the 1920s, they would do these special, like in the Sunday paper, usually a description of a dance by usually a pair of dance teachers, and they would come with little pictures of them doing the dance and a written description of the step. So that's all kind of fun stuff that you can find.
I think we can move into our dance demo now with Sade. Very excited.
Hello, happy to be here. Hi, so my name is Katie Warner. I joined Danse Libre in 2015. And so the dance that I'm going to share with everyone today is called the Grand Polonaise. And it's actually just going to be a snippet of a larger work that was choreographed by Richard Powers, who we mentioned earlier that we work closely with. So normally Danse Libre performs the Grand Polonaise as part of our Victorian set. And by Victorian, I'm talking about the period in history that encompasses Queen Victoria's reign. And Danse Libre even narrows that window more by focusing on a specific period from about 1848 to 1852. Now, the Polonaise itself started much earlier, again, as an early form of Polish folk dance, but it really got popular within the nobility and Polish court. So the style has really evolved. It's what we call a processional dance, so similar to a march, only this is done in 3/4 time, and it usually consists of couples holding hands and walking around the dance floor, and they usually weave in and out of other couples. So you can imagine a full ballroom, all of these couples weaving in and out, forming beautiful, intricate patterns along the dance floor. And so we're going to try the basic step today. And if you actually go to a formal ballroom, you can often see this still being performed today. So it is a living, breathing dance step. Before we jump up and try it, just a couple of things to think about, and that is the style and stance. So it's very proud and stately. So if you think of yourself as nobility, if you're a lady, you most likely have your corset on. So slouching is not really an option. You really hold that spine straight throughout and keep those shoulders over the hips. So if you want to give it a try, we're going to jump up. We're going to start in first position. So if we put the feet together and open up the toes into first, keeping our heels together. We start this. There's 2 different hand holds. Leads, the gentlemen usually have hands on the hips, and then they present one hand to their partner so that they can lead them around the floor. There's one point in the dance where the gentlemen kneel and will lead the woman around in a circle. Ladies, if you can picture wearing a large dress, your arms are actually just going to be resting on top of that skirt, and then again giving one hand to your partner so they can lead you around the floor. So starting from first, with our toes turned out, we are going to start with a plie, and then we push forward and take 3 steps forward. Walk, 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 and then we plie again as we brush one leg to extend it in front. So let's just try that one more time. Now, normally leads start on the left and ladies start right, but for today, whatever foot is comfortable. So we're gonna bend the knees again, and we're gonna take 3 steps forward. Step, 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 and then a plie, bending both knees, and a brush. All right, so we're gonna try a few of that in a row now, just moving around the floor, and you can take whatever pattern you want along the floor. We bend and walk. Step, 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 brush. Step, 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 brush. Step, 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 brush. All right. Last thing to add is a step and a point. So after we do our last step brush, we're just going to step forward and tap the foot in front. So if you are wearing your corset, obviously you can't really bend forward very much, but you can definitely twist toward your partner. So we're going to try 3 sets of our basic and then add a step and point, moving around the dance floor. Bending the knees, we take step, 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 and a brush. Step, 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 brush. Step, 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 brush, step, and a point. And so that is the basic polonaise step that we do when we perform it. And we're actually, would we like to try it with a little piece of music? Let's see. So when we start, it's very formal. So when we start, we're going to imagine facing your partner on the dance floor, and we will reverence to acknowledge our partner at the beginning, and then we would take our first step into the basic polonaise. All right, so we'll just try it with some music so you can get a feel for the dance. It's really strong. It's very proud. And reverence. And walk, brush. Step, point. Step, point. And we step and acknowledge our partner. So that is the basic polonaise.
Thank you.
That was lovely.
Shade.
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's a really enjoyable piece. The music is really it's invigorating. It's really lovely to dance.
Nice. We have some questions from the audience. From Colin. I'll go from Colin, then we'll go to Jason. Okay. So Colin asked, "What is your favorite dance to perform?" Any one of you can answer that one.
What do you guys think?
Oh, there's so many.
There's a lot.
I personally really enjoyed learning the early waltz, the Wilson's waltz from our Regency set, because everyone has heard of a waltz, but it was very interesting to learn how it initially began.
And I think whichever period you like best is somewhat influenced by kind of performing you like. So I tend to be a kind of big, loud performer. So I guess I like big, loud dances. I like the ragtime dances. I like the 1930s stuff. You know, I like all of it. What about you, Pei-Ling?
I think I'm similar. I tend to like a little bit of the 1920s, 1930s dances. They're just so much more playful. Also, they were committed to film, so we actually have like videos of what they're doing. Part of what we normally do, which is the Regency and Victorian dances, is how prim and proper you are. Like, women just didn't walk around alone. You had to walk across the ballroom with another person to accurately stage it. And so, you know, it is it is a different time period, and that's like, it's somewhat hard to get accustomed to when we actually do shows.
And I have a couple of different things that I like. I do like the early 20th century, like foxtrots and things like that. But also, we do some stuff in the Victorian era that's also a lot of fun. The Scotch reel is always a lot of fun to do. It's a piece that looks it's got a whole lot going on, and it's a lot of fun to do, and it's very athletic. And some of the mazurkas are really technically very interesting to do and fun to perform, although they're quite challenging, and it's hard to convey that to an audience, but they're a lot of fun to do.
I think you were to ask our group, everybody likes to waltz. I don't think anybody in the group who does not like to waltz. I think that would be the most popular. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So looks like Colin would like to, no, not Colin, Jason, excuse me. Jason would like to know, what is the best thing about dancing in the Bay Area, and what is the most challenging thing?
Well, I guess I can start. I think it's really great. There's a lot of different styles represented here, and there's a lot of opportunities to do some of these more period styles that you maybe wouldn't have other places. So we are able to actually go out and socially dance dances of the ragtime or dances of the Victorian era, depending on what organization is putting on the event. So I feel really fortunate about that. And we also have in the Bay Area a large number of men who are interested in dancing, which is not common all over the country. So that's a pretty cool thing. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. It's like, I think there's just so many dance styles represented. We're fortunate to have a lot of dance historians around who really invigorate the youth to get into it. So I think a lot of places where Victorian and historical dance is held on, there's not really quite the turnover of people who are interested. And so that part's very exciting. I think it's hard because in the Bay Area, because there's so many other hobbies people have too. So it's like you kind of have to pick one sometimes. There's like so many things to do.
I mean, the logistics of getting us together as a group is challenging too, because we are spread out. I mean, even just of the people on this call, we are like all over the Bay Area, from like near Santa Cruz to on the other side of the bay. So it's challenging to get everybody together, like physically, because you have to be in the same space to do this.
We have a question from Anne regarding costumes. Who makes the costumes, and how do, okay, yes. Could you talk about the costumes, and since your work spans an expansive period, maybe talk about how costumes differ during different periods, and also how to make them authentic.
Well, Pei-Ling, do you want to start maybe?
Yeah. So I think we have guidelines. We have guidelines for how what costumes should look like. People can make their costumes themselves. Sade, I believe, makes all of her own costumes. We have some recommended costume makers who are very well known, and we also oftentimes people have those costume makers make it. Fundamentally, in our group, each individual is responsible for their own costume because it really fit is such a important to dance. And so but we provide guidelines, we provide textbooks. Many of the dancers in our group are costume historians as well, and they are interested in costumes for the sake of costumes. And so they take on the role of helping curate the costumes. And so, if you want to choose a color, you want it to be period accurate. So the swatch of fabric matters. But we also, they're performance clothing, so you actually have to do a lot of shows in them. And so that part is there are things we do where we use zippers because we have quick changes. Zippers weren't a thing, but and so there's we do take some artistic license just because what we do is performance. It's not just historic costuming. And so that kind of is how our group approaches costumes.
So, for example, this dress here. This is what I wear to do our Victorian. It has a zipper in the front here. That is not historically accurate. It should lace up the back, but there's a reason those ladies all had ladies' maids. It's because there's only one way to get laced up in the back, and it's if someone else helps you. So I got tired of having to make everybody help me get into my dress. So we do take some liberties, but at the same time, the dress is made out of silk. You can see there's a lot of decorative work that was inspired by an original dress. So we try and like walk that fine line. Yeah.
Nice. I have a question. I want to step back just a little bit in terms of the dances coming from a folk space. And I believe you talked about, I may have missed it, but the turkey trot and those dances that were traditionally named after the animals, and that's especially out of the African American dance communities, are agriculturally based.
Mm-hmm.
Those movements in that dance. Have you, in other research or reconstruction, gone deeper into that in terms of like what instead of what's on the written page, like because those forms got lifted up out of something else? I think you mentioned it for the polka, like going back down into the folk part of it, and what changes when that happens.
Yes, well, I certainly think, okay, I can start and you guys jump in. I think that with the original folk element to it, it is vernacular, and so it's not written down. So we have to extrapolate from what we know and try and maybe either work backwards or piece together what we think might have been. Because a lot of the early roots of those dances, they just never got preserved. Once you get into the 20th century, you get a little more lucky. You start to have some video evidence, and I think we actually shared with you a link. I don't know if we can get to it in time. That's of African Americans here in San Francisco Barbary Coast. There they are. And we're so fortunate that this video survives, because otherwise you see reference to this dance. This is called the Texas Tommy. But without the video, we would not know exactly what it was supposed to look like. We would be left trying to figure it out from oblique references. Because it exists in this video form, it's really cool. You can see exactly how it was done. And the other thing that's really neat about this particular dance, the Texas Tommy, is that it evolved, and that name Texas Tommy now is associated with a move and swing dance, which of course the Lindy Hop. I love how the dogs in this video. The Lindy Hop came into prominence largely with African Americans in the 1930s, and the name of this dance and a move that I think you might see him do, where he takes her arm behind her back, and that is kind of the signature of the Texas Tommy dance, becomes the name of the move 30 years later in swing.
Thank you.
Do you want to say something about that, Hui Wang? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Richard references, in the video, it started, we believe it started in the Barbary Coast in San Francisco, and like people were doing it here in the Bay Area, and then people brought it to the Savoy Ballroom, which was like where a lot of Lindy Hop was popularized. I believe a specific individual, his name escapes me, brought it there, and it was done there. And it's interesting because the very specific move survives in how swing dance is done, but like there's a whole dance style, and we have just snippets of it through video, and that's all we have that's like remaining of that dance.
There's a lot of that in the, like, for instance, we do a dance called the St. Louis Shag. That's the one, right? That has the stomp on six.
Yeah.
And we know about it because Arthur Murray ultimately wrote about it in the late 30s, but I think it probably existed much earlier. And I think that because there is music from at least the 20s, like the Moten Stomp, has a beat on six, where you would have, if you were doing the dance as we do it now, it has that distinctive break on six that other pieces don't have. So I think you could probably extrapolate that it existed much earlier, but there isn't written, I'm not aware of written documentation. Or similarly, the Big Apple, which was done on the East Coast and parts of the South, it was a call and response dance, which was again very vernacular. You would go to the event and the person would call it and you would do that step, but it was not something that was written down. And there is a funny anecdote that I believe is true, where they were on the West Coast. It wasn't, who was it? It was somebody from Whitey's Lindy Hoppers, I thought.
Not Frankie Manning, or
I don't know. It was someone involved with the film in Hollywood.
Okay.
Called someone on the East Coast and was like, we hear about this Big Apple. Can you describe it to us over the phone? And they tried to describe it over the phone, and a piece made it into the movie that is a Big Apple, but it does not look like probably what the people in the South were doing. But it's its own thing. It's a very famous routine that's done by a lot of the swing community. Am I right, Pei-Ling? Pei-Ling is more.
Yeah, no, I believe that's true. And we actually do the hilarious film version because that was what was committed. And you can see it too. And it's funny now, if you know the story, you're like, oh, I could see how somebody playing telephone for real would make these moves up based on words, but like they look nothing alike. You would never, if we did the Big Apple for the swing community, they'd be like, that is not the Big Apple. That is not what we do now.
Right. And I guess in that's where now we have the ability to go back and research and get down into the nitty gritty of what the folk from which it came said it was. Like,
of course, the other problem is, like, for instance, I was talking about it appears in newspapers. If you go and look in early newspapers about the Texas Tommy or something, you will find a lot of varying stories about where it came from. There's somebody who says it comes from Texas, and there's somebody, because you can't really trust that written documentation. Those are not people who are closely connected with the people who originated it. So it just requires a lot of time spent with the material and a lot of knowledge of what came before, which we run into when we do Victorian pieces. Even just reading the manual, they will sometimes reference a figure without any explanation because the assumption is we would know already what it is. And if we don't already know what it is, it's very confusing.
yeah. We have, I think, one more question here from Nanda. Do you ever do performances followed by a workshop for attendees to learn simple dance?
We occasionally do. Surprisingly little interest in that. We've done that for libraries before. Sometimes libraries have us come in and teach a dance, and then we will teach to whoever's there who's interested. People tend to feel kind of shy. So when you ask them to get up, they kind of all go, oh, not me. But yes, that is a thing that we do.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Well, it's kind of amazing how quickly this time has passed. I could go on listening to you for quite a while, but unfortunately, we do need to say goodbye. And I really would like to thank you, Kimber Rudo, David Stark, and Pei-Ling Lee. Thank you so much for participating in Living Traditions and for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
It's so lovely to be involved with your organization. We have met the coolest people, and we have gotten to really engage in some amazing opportunities that we never would have had without you. So everybody donate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'd also like to thank our viewers for joining us today. And thanks also for those who submitted questions. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Again, if you enjoyed tonight's conversation and want to support World Arts West year-round efforts to spotlight the Bay Area's cultural treasures, please consider making a donation at worldartswest.org, or you can text WAW to 56512. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, July 28th at 6:30 p.m. for our final episode in the series. We're at number 4 already. This is amazing. Oh, wow. We will speak with Nadi Sekek, pardon me, Sekek, the artistic director of Nava Dance Theater, a Bharatanatyam dance company based in San Francisco. Nadi operates on the belief that Bharatanatyam, while classical, is a modern medium with potential to push boundaries of how we can use traditional art forms to understand place, identity, and politics. Until then, stay safe, wear your mask, and dance your troubles away. I'm gonna do a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
I hemeneno kokolo hibai. Kapo iki.
天边放飞如水流。